The photograph from 1878 looked ordinary at first, until historians noticed the girl's necklace. One afternoon, light filled the Charleston Historical Society as Dr. Sarah Mitchell unpacked another set of old photographs. It was October 2023, and she had spent 3 months sorting Civil War-era records. Most pictures showed serious family portraits, with men in dark suits, women in detailed dresses, and children posed like small adults. But one photo made her stop. It showed a family of 4 on the porch of a large plantation-style home. The father wore a fitted vest, the mother had on a high-collared lace dress, and between them stood a teenage boy and a young girl who looked about 12. Sarah lifted her magnifying glass, something she did out of habit after years of studying historic documents. She slowly examined the building, the clothing, and the faint date written at the bottom, April 1878. Then she noticed the girl's necklace. A small silver chain rested just above her white dress. Sarah leaned in, surprised. The pendant wasn't a cross or a simple charm. Even through the faded tones, she could see detailed markings on the metal. They matched symbols she knew from her research on resistance groups. Her hands shook a little as she grabbed her digital microscope. Under the lens, the symbols became clear. A North Star, a grid-like pattern scratched with intention. Tiny marks around the edge that looked similar to quilting codes linked to the Underground Railroad. But that didn't add up. The family in the picture was white. The house behind them showed clear wealth. And this was Charleston, South Carolina, a place where openly rejecting slavery during that era came with serious risk. Sarah sat back, staring at the image. For 145 years, countless people had looked at this photo. How had no one noticed this necklace? She spent the next 2 hours taking detailed pictures from every angle. She needed to know who this family was. The photo came from a 1983 donation by the estate of someone named Catherine Whitmore, but nothing else was included. She opened her laptop and searched Charleston's 1878 census records. The home in the background was her best lead, with its tall columns and decorative ironwork. By evening, she had narrowed it to 3 wealthy families in that area. The Harrison family who owned a textile mill, the Petton family who traded cotton, and the Whitmore family led by Thomas Whitmore, who ran a successful shipping company. The Whitmore name matched the donation, and Sarah felt a rush of hope. Property records confirmed the address. 47 Trad Street. The house still existed, now divided into apartments. Records from 1878 listed Thomas Whitmore living there with his wife Elizabeth, son James, and daughter Anna. Anna Whitmore had to be the girl in the photo. More records showed Anna was born in 1866, which made her 12 when the picture was taken. James was born in 1864. Then things became unusual. In 1879, 1 year after the photo, Thomas Whitmore's business collapsed without warning. The family sold their home for far less than it was worth, and by 1880, they had left Charleston with no record of where they went. Sarah leaned back, trying to understand. Families with strong social connections and stable businesses didn't disappear so suddenly. Something had happened to the Whitmores, something serious enough to make them leave everything behind. She looked again at the photograph. Anna stared into the camera with an expression that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a frown. It felt stronger, almost bold, and around her neck was a necklace no one expected to see. The next morning, Sarah reached her office early with the photos stored safely. She had barely slept, thinking through everything. Before she shared any conclusions, she wanted an expert opinion. She called Dr. Marcus Reynolds at the Smithsonian, a specialist in Underground Railroad history and symbolism. They had worked together before, and she trusted him. "Marcus, I need you to look at something," she said when he picked up. "Can I send you a high-resolution scan?" Sarah asked. "Of course. What is it?" Marcus said. "A photograph from 1878. The necklace in it has markings that look like railroad codes, but the situation is complicated." 20 minutes later, her phone rang. "Sarah, where did this come from?" Marcus sounded energized. "These markings are real. Look at the North Star at the top. That placement matches how it was used in South Carolina from the 1850s through the 1870s. And this grid pattern here, with 7 vertical lines and 5 horizontal ones, That's a map. Sarah felt her heartbeat jump. A map of what? Safe houses. Each intersection shows a location. This is how conductors shared routes with people searching for freedom. But Sarah, these necklaces were only given to those directly involved. Conductors, station keepers, people taking serious risks. The girl wearing it is white, Sarah said quietly, from a wealthy Charleston family. Marcus didn't speak for a moment. That shouldn't be possible. In Charleston in 1878, a white family helping freed or escaping people would have faced complete ruin. Socially, financially, maybe worse. No one with that level of status would take that kind of risk. Unless they did, Sarah said softly, staring at Anna Whitmore's face in the photograph. And maybe that's why their lives changed so suddenly. She told him about the sudden collapse of the business and the family's disappearance from city records. You have to find out what happened to them, Marcus said. If this is real, if this family was actually part of the railroad in Charleston after the Civil War, it changes what we understand about resistance in the South. Sarah spent the next week buried in research. She followed scattered references to the Whitmore family, tried to trace their path after they left Charleston in 1879. A shipping manifest from Mobile, Alabama showed Thomas Whitmore booking travel to Philadelphia in late 1879. A city directory from Philadelphia listed an E. Whitmore working as a seamstress in 1881, likely Elizabeth after the family lost its money. There was no sign of Thomas, which made Sarah wonder if he died or taken another identity. But it was Anna who stood out. School records from a Quaker school in Philadelphia listed an Anna W., who enrolled in 1880, with her tuition covered as charity. The Quakers had been deeply connected to the Underground Railroad. That felt like more than coincidence. Sarah contacted the school, now a private academy, and asked for its historical files. 3 days later, she received a scanned document that made her stop. It was a recommendation letter for Anna Whitmore written in 1883. It praised her commitment to fairness and mentioned her family's courage during a time of hardship. The phrasing was careful but clear enough to suggest something deeper. She called Marcus again. I need help, she said. I'm finding clues, but I need someone who knows Charleston's local history. Someone who can tell me if a white family could really have been part of this. There's one person, Marcus replied. Evelyn Carter. She's 83, a retired professor who grew up here. Her great-great-grandmother was freed through the railroad. If anyone knows hidden stories, it's her. 2 days later, Sarah sat in Evelyn Carter's living room in downtown Charleston. The photograph lay on the table in front of them. Evelyn studied it closely through her thick glasses, her hands steady. The Whitmores, Evelyn said quietly. My grandmother used to tell stories about them. We always thought they were just family tales, maybe a little exaggerated. Sarah leaned in. What did she tell you? Evelyn's eyes sharpened. She said there was a white family who helped people disappear. After the war, when most believed the railroad was done, they kept helping. They supported people who were still stuck in forced labor contracts and prison leasing. Dangerous work. Why would they take that risk? Sarah asked. Evelyn gave a small, sad smile. That's the real question. She led Sarah into a small room filled with boxes of old letters, papers, and photos collected over generations. My family kept everything, Evelyn said. We knew our history mattered. Even when no one wanted to listen, she pulled out a worn leather journal with fragile pages. This belonged to my great-great-grandmother Ruth. She wrote about her escape in 1877, 2 years after the war. Sarah opened the journal with care. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as if written in short, stolen moments. She read aloud. May 14th, 1877. Arrived at the house on Trad Street after dark. The woman gave me food and dry clothes. She said her daughter insists on helping, though it frightens her. The girl cannot be more than 11. Sarah looked up. Anna Whitmore would have been 11 in 1877. Evelyn nodded. Keep reading. Sarah turned the pages, finding more of Ruth's writing. Ruth had stayed with the Whitmore family for 3 weeks, hidden in a small cellar while Thomas arranged safe travel north on one of the ships. The entries described a family living with constant fear, fully aware that one mistake could destroy them. One passage stood out. June 2nd, 1877. Elizabeth gave me the necklace today. She said it belonged to her mother, who wore it during the war. The symbols show safe houses from here to Richmond. She made me learn them by heart. When I asked why she risks everything, she said some things matter more than safety. Sarah felt her chest tighten. The necklace in the photograph had been passed from Elizabeth to Anna. As a promise, Evelyn said softly, to keep the work going. Sarah carefully photographed each page, her hands unsteady as the importance of what she was reading sank in. This wasn't just an interesting story. It was evidence of resistance that had been hidden for generations. Why wasn't any of this ever recorded? She asked. Evelyn's expression grew serious. Because white Charleston did not want to admit that some of their own acted against them, and black families learned to keep quiet. Talking openly could put those helpers in danger, even years later. Back at the archives, Sarah worked with new determination. If the Whitmore family had supported people for years, something specific had to explain their downfall in 1879. She found the answer in old Charleston newspapers. A small article from March 1879, tucked away on page 7, read, "Local shipping company under investigation." It said that Thomas Whitmore's business was being reviewed for irregular cargo and passenger records. The details were vague, but the meaning was clear. Someone had noticed that his ships were carrying more people north than the paperwork showed. Sarah compared this with Port Authority documents. In February 1879, customs officials in Savannah boarded a Whitmore-owned ship, the Morning Star. They discovered 3 black passengers hidden below deck without the required papers. The passengers were arrested. Thomas was questioned but released, helped by his status and reputation. Still, the incident exposed something he could not explain away. Charleston society began to suspect he was helping people escape unfair labor contracts and harsh post-war laws. Letters held by the South Carolina Historical Society showed what followed. Business partners pulled out. The bank demanded repayment of his loans. His company collapsed in weeks. Threatening notes were left at the Whitmore house. Someone even threw a brick through their front window with a message attached. Traitor. One letter from Elizabeth to her sister in Virginia captured their fear. We cannot stay. James was followed home by men who shouted threats. Anna wakes screaming from nightmares. Thomas says we must leave before something worse happens. We have lost everything, but at least we still have our lives and our conscience. Sarah leaned back, stunned by the depth of their sacrifice. This family had risked everything to help people they didn't know, and in return received no protection, no recognition, nothing. She pictured 12-year-old Anna, wearing that necklace in the photograph, unaware of how quickly her life would change. Did she understand the meaning of the symbol she was trusted with? Sarah needed to know what happened to her. The search was slow. The trail faded after the Whitmores reached Philadelphia. But Sarah stayed with it, digging through census listings, school files, and old newspapers. And finally, she found Anna again. In 1890, Anna Whitmore appeared in Boston records. She was 24 and working as a teacher at a school serving children from formerly enslaved families. A short piece in a local progressive paper mentioned her by name. Miss Anna Whitmore shows exceptional dedication to her students, many of whom arrive unable to read. Her patience and steady effort were noted as an example of meaningful teaching. Wanting to learn more, Sarah contacted the school that had taken over the original institution. What she discovered stunned her. Before Anna passed away in 1943, she had donated all her personal papers to their archives. No one had looked through them in decades. 2 weeks later, several boxes arrived. Inside were letters, diary pages, and photographs covering Anna's entire adult life. But one item immediately drew Sarah's attention, a small wooden box. Inside was a necklace, the same one from the 1878 photograph. Sarah lifted it with shaking hands. The silver was worn, but the markings were still clear. Under it lay a note in Anna's later handwriting. This belonged to my grandmother, then my mother, then me. It represents the most important work any of us ever did. I hope whoever finds this understands what we gave up and why it mattered. In Anna's 1905 diary, Sarah finally found the full account. Anna wrote about her childhood, watching her parents help people escape violence and exploitation. She described a night in 1879 when men gathered outside their home with torches, calling for her father. She remembered her mother packing quickly, her brother crying, and the frightening trip north with almost nothing. But she also wrote about pride. We lost our home, our money, and our place in society. But I watched my parents choose compassion over comfort, fairness over safety. They showed me that privilege means nothing unless you use it to support others. I wear this necklace every day to remember. Sarah wiped her eyes as she photographed each page. She then prepared her findings for publication. The material she gathered, the photograph, Ruth's journal, the Whitmore letters, and Anna's diaries, formed a report that would reshape what historians knew about post-Civil War resistance. But before sending it to journals, she wanted to reach the Whitmore family's descendants. They had the right to know their own history. Using genealogical records, Sarah traced Anna's family line. Anna married in 1895 and had 3 children. Her youngest daughter, Helen, had 2 sons. One of them was still living. Robert Chin, 78, in Portland, Oregon. Sarah called him with her heart racing. Mr. Chun, my name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a historian in Charleston, and I've uncovered something important about your great-grandmother, Anna Whitmore. There was a pause. I don't know much about that side of the family, Robert said carefully. My grandmother rarely talked about her past. I understand, Sarah replied gently, but I think you should hear what they did. She told him everything, the photograph, the necklace, the hidden history, and the family sacrifice. Robert listened quietly. When she finished, she heard him softly crying. My whole life, I wondered why my grandmother seemed sad when she mentioned Charleston, he said. She always said her family had to leave, but never explained. I thought maybe they did something wrong. No, Sarah said with calm conviction. They did something remarkable. They helped people who needed it most. Your family showed real courage. The world just didn't know the truth. After long silence, Robert said, Can I see the photograph? Sarah emailed him the scan. 10 minutes later, he called back. That's her, he said in a voice full of emotion. I have a picture of her much older. The eyes are the same. That strong look. Dr. Mitchell, he added, thank you for bringing this to me. There's one more thing, Sarah said. I have the necklace. It was saved with Anna's papers. I believe it belongs with your family. Robert's breath caught. You found the necklace? I'm holding it right now. 2 weeks later, Robertson stood inside the Charleston Historical Society, holding the necklace his great-grandmother had worn in 1878. Sarah watched as Robert slowly turned the necklace in his hands, running his finger over the markings. It's lighter than I expected, he said quietly. It's silver, Sarah explained. The carvings are deep enough that they stayed clear even as the metal aged. Dr. Marcus Reynolds at the Smithsonian confirmed that this exact pattern was used by Underground Railroad conductors in South Carolina. Families like yours use it to guide people north and show which homes were safe. Robert glanced toward the photograph on the wall. 12-year-old Anna Whitmore looked back with steady, determined expression. She was only a child, he murmured, a child who understood fairness. I found entries where she wrote about helping her parents, Sarah told him. She brought food to people hiding in their cellar. She memorized the symbols so she would be ready if her parents ever couldn't help. Just then, Evelyn Carter walked into the room, moving carefully but with purpose. Sarah introduced them. Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Evelyn Carter. Her great-great-grandmother Ruth was helped by her family in 1877. Evelyn offered her hand with a gentle smile. Your great-grandmother saved my ancestor's life. Ruth wrote about a brave young girl who treated her kindly at a time when the world refused to. Robert shook her hand, overcome with emotion. I had no idea. My grandmother never talked about any of this. They couldn't, Evelyn said softly. Sharing these stories could still bring danger, even many years later. Charleston remembers everything, and not always kindly. But now the truth can finally be shared. Sarah had arranged for the local newspaper to cover the moment. A photographer captured Robert and Evelyn standing side by side, the necklace held carefully between them, the 1878 photograph hanging behind them. The headline would read, "Hidden Heroes, Charleston Family's Underground Railroad Role, revealed after 145 years." Robert lifted the necklace toward the light. "What happens to it now?" "That's your choice," Sarah said. "It belongs to your family." Robert looked at Evelyn, then back at Sarah. "I think it should stay here in Charleston, where people can learn the whole story. My great-grandmother wanted the next generations to understand what her family gave up and why. This necklace can help teach that." 6 months later, the Charleston Historical Society opened a new exhibition. At the center was the 1878 photograph, lit softly, with a necklace displayed securely beside it. Around the room, Sarah arranged the letters, diaries, and documents that revealed the Whitmore family's journey. The opening night drew a large crowd, historians, teachers, descendants of freedom seekers, and local residents eager to learn about this newly uncovered history. Sarah watched people pause in front of the photograph. Many wiped away tears. Teachers pointed out the markings on the necklace and explained their meaning to students. Robert brought his children and grandchildren. They stood together before Anna's image as Robert told them the full story. Their story, one they could now pass down with pride. Evelyn sat nearby, resting but alert, taking in the moment. Sarah sat with her. "Thank you for trusting me with Ruth's journal," Sarah said. "Thank you for making sure their story wasn't forgotten," Evelyn replied. "For too long, we've heard only one version of history, the version people were comfortable telling. But there were always others who chose differently. They deserve to be remembered, too." Later, Marcus Reynolds gave a brief talk about the meaning of the necklace's symbols and what they revealed about resistance efforts that continued even after the Civil War. "The Whitmore family shows us that courage isn't always loud," Marcus said. "Sometimes it's small, steady choices to stand against injustice, knowing you may lose everything." After the crowd began to thin, Sarah returned to the photograph. Anna Whitmore's eyes seemed to meet hers across 145 years, the necklace clear against her dress. A promise kept. A story finally. Sarah thought about how close this piece of history had come to disappearing. How many times a photograph had been filed away or overlooked. She wondered how many more stories waited hidden in quiet boxes and forgotten archives. She smiled. Anna's story was no longer lost. And perhaps, in some way, the girl in the picture had been waiting for this moment all along. The Whitmore story changed more than one set of family records. It changed how people in Charleston looked at their own city. For years, the idea that a wealthy white family had taken part in quiet acts of resistance seemed unthinkable. Yet the evidence was now in full view, and people could no longer deny the depth and reach of those hidden networks. Visitors walked through the exhibit with a new sense of responsibility, realizing that history holds far more than official records or well-known names. It also holds the quiet choices of ordinary families who stepped forward when no one asked them to. In the months that followed, students wrote school reports about the Whitmores. Community groups invited Sarah to speak. Local teachers brought classes to the museum so children could stand in front of the photograph and see a 12-year-old girl who found her own way to help others. Many young visitors asked the same question: how did someone so young understand what needed to be done? It reminded Sarah that courage often begins early, shaped by what children see and hear in their homes. The discovery also inspired more people to search their own family histories. Letters and documents that had sat untouched in attics and closets were brought to the Historical Society. Some contained new leads. Some added small but important pieces to stories long thought lost. Sarah and her colleagues were soon busy cataloging fresh material, knowing each fragment could open another door into the past. As for Robert Chun, he stayed in touch with Sarah and Evelyn. He visited Charleston again with more relatives, all eager to see the exhibit and learn about the family they never truly knew. They stood together before Anna's necklace case, grateful that her story had finally reached them. In quiet moments, Sarah often returned to the photograph. Anna's steady gaze reminded her why the work mattered. This one discovery had filled in a missing part of Charleston's past. It proved that hidden acts of kindness can survive across generations, waiting for someone patient enough to uncover them. and it encouraged everyone who visited the exhibit to look deeper, listen harder, and keep asking the questions that bring lost stories back into the light.